Well, it's a delight to be with you. It's always a delight to be with you. And in this strange hybrid state of being, to just acknowledge that even though we are apparently separate, we're never separate. We are always connected by that absolute, unending, unified presence of being that awakens within each and every one of us, and yet is so much more than a local consciousness, is a consciousness that manifests as all that is. And in that presence, in that being, in that one, we are always connected. So I greet you with deep joy on this morning. Tonight begins the festival, the celebration of Hanukkah, and I am delighted to be able to speak to you about some of the mysteries of this festival of lights. And I'd like to begin by talking about perhaps the most amazing mystery of all, and that is the many different ways in which the word Hanukkah can be spelled in English. Obviously, in Hebrew, it's only spelled one way, and all the ways it's spelled in English are attempts to transliterate the sounds of the Hebrew Chanukkah. I found on the internet evidence that there could be 20 different ways of spelling Hanukkah in English, which is really remarkable. It really, I don't know of any other Jewish or any other holiday that admits of so many possibilities of spelling. And I would like to think that that indicates a secret depth of the celebration, a secret depth of the festival that is just seldom acknowledged and seldom celebrated and needs to be reclaimed. So the first thing I'd like to do is tell you how actually it is really to be spelled. Because of the specifics of transliterating the Hebrew, the correct spelling is Chanukkah. And I'm not going to go into the grammatical reasons why that is correct, but I will insist that that actually is the correct spelling, even though the most approved spelling in English, if you look at the Merriam-Webster dictionary, does not begin with CH, but begins with H, Hanukkah. And I guess Hanukkah is a pronunciation for those who can't quite grasp the ch sound, but I prefer to kind of welcome the ch. I often joke that the ch in Hanukkah is like the ch in Christmas, but that actually is not so. Hanukkah is a Hebrew word that means dedication or rededication. And it refers to the rededication of the ancient temple in Jerusalem after it had been defiled by the Greek Seleucids in the middle of the 2nd century before the Common Era. And I will talk about that in a moment, but I first want to talk about the second mystery of Hanukkah, and that is, when does it come? Like, I don't know how many of you are aware that the dates of Hanukkah seem to shift. They get earlier, like this year, Hanukkah starts tonight. It starts right after Thanksgiving, and it ends on the 6th of December, well before Christmas. And yet, soon, Hanukkah will appear right next to Christmas. So the question can be asked, what is this with this holiday that keeps switching time on our calendar? And the reality is that in the Hebrew calendar, Hanukkah always is the same. It's always begins on the 25th day of the Hebrew month called Kislev. The Hebrew year has 12 months, but because the months are lunar months, and the lunar year is 10 and a half days shorter than the solar year, the calendar, the holidays keep getting about 10 days earlier each year until around the third year. It's called a leap year. And the leap year is handled, and it has been handled for many, many centuries, by adding another month. So a lunar month, which is 28, 29 days, to the calendar. And when that month is added at the end of the year, Hanukkah, as well as other Jewish festivals, is moved 30 days later in the year, and then creeps up according to the lunar calendar, and then is moved again. So that's the second mystery. This year, Hanukkah begins tonight. It always comes and has within it the darkest night of the calendar year. The darkest night is going to be, we think of the darkest night as the solstice, because the solstice is the 24-hour period that has the greatest degree of darkness. However, the darkest night is going to be the full moon closest to the solstice. And often on the solstice itself, there's a moon. So it's not, in fact, even though it's the longest night, it's not the darkest night. The darkest night is always during Hanukkah. And this year, the darkest night is the 3rd of December, which is the new moon heading into the Hebrew month called Tevet. And that is the darkest night celebrated during the 8 days of Hanukkah. Now, it's an interesting and terrible reality that the placement of what is now the state of Israel, and has been the homeland for the Hebrew people and then for the Jewish people for thousands of years, is a kind of property that has been overrun by empires one after the other. And in the 2nd century, the 3rd century before the Common Era, the Greeks under Alexander the Great had conquered that area. One of the things that Alexander did was Alexander allowed the indigenous population to celebrate the holidays as they wished. Later on, after his death, the Greek kingdom split, and the Seleucid Greeks, who took over the area of what is now Israel, enforced their own worship and desecrated, defiled the temple structure, made sacrifices on the altar that were totally unacceptable, and raised the ire of the Jewish community to such an extent that a rebellion broke out. It may have been the first guerrilla warfare in history. A relatively small military band wound up surprisingly defeating the Seleucid Greeks and being able to rededicate the temple on the 25th of the Hebrew month of Kislev. And that rededication got celebrated as an 8-day holiday called Hanukkah. Hanukkah meaning dedication or rededication, primarily at the time meaning a rededication, a dedication to the sacredness of the ancient temple, the center of the community, the center of the spiritual life of the Jewish community at that time. However, the real mystery of Hanukkah is what happened to it later. Because at the beginning, it was a celebration of a military victory, which was wonderful and rare in the lifetime of the Jewish community. But in the 2nd century of the Common Era, which now is maybe 300 years later, the literature that is taking shape, because the Jewish tradition is a tradition of literature. We're called the people of the book. It's really people of the books. And after the Hebrew Bible was canonized around the year 90 of the Common Era, a whole other literature took life, first in the first 2 centuries of the Common Era, called the Mishnah, and then in the next 300 years, completed around the year 500 of the Common Era, a vastly longer literature called the Talmud. Talmud is from a word that means teaching, learning, just as Torah itself is a word that means teaching. In the Talmud, a discussion, and we were records of discussions of the various leaders and scholars of the community, the question suddenly appears, what is Hanukkah? And the answer given is that Hanukkah is the celebration of light, celebrating a miracle of light that happened when the temple was rededicated after the Maccabees, the guerrilla warriors, defeated the Seleucid Greeks in the middle of the 2nd century before the Common Era. At that time of rededication, the Talmud states, the oil for the sacred lamps, the menorah, which was a 7-branched candelabra, which was oil, of course, at that time. Candles weren't there yet, which was to be lit essentially every night. There was only enough oil for 1 night. And it took 8 days before they could obtain more consecrated, pure oil for the lamp. And that single cruse, that single daily amount of oil wound up burning for the entire 8 days. And that's the miracle of light, says the Talmud, that Hanukkah celebrates. Now, that's really a remarkable thing. What's most remarkable about it is that it translated a celebration of military victory into a celebration of spiritual awakening, which is the deepest of teachings. A teaching meant for us right now, a teaching always meant for us. It is the reclaiming of the essential miracle of life. It is the essential miracle of consciousness. It is the essential celebration of the miracle of the essential nature of our being. It is the miracle of the illumination of the presence, awakening within each and every one of us, as each and every one of us, right now and right here. Hanukkah is seen as a relatively minor Jewish holiday. It's often seen, because of its proximity to Christmas, as the Jewish Christmas. And in a sense, because at least as far as I can tell, Christmas too is a celebration of an absolutely essential, eternal illumination of presence. So that Hanukkah, in fact, does reflect and engage the deepest of spiritual realities and spiritual truths in both Hebrew and Christian tradition, although as it's practiced and as it's celebrated, so much of that essential, enduring, mysterious truth is forgotten and is not acknowledged and is not celebrated. It is time to reclaim. It is time to reclaim the essential mystery, the essential miracle of light. It is time for us to understand that a miracle is not something that happens once and doesn't happen again. That's an event, and it can be a wondrous event, and it can be a blessed event, and it can be an amazing event, but it's not a miracle. A miracle is an awakening of something that is so amazing and so vast and so awesome, and it is a continually unfolding awakening. When Moses was alone in the wilderness, millennia before, and in the wilderness encountered what gets translated as the burning bush, and in that illumination understood Ehyeh asher ehyeh, I am as I am. That one presence, that one being, that enduring miracle erupted into the language of Hebrew spirituality. And they didn't invent it. Light invents us. We don't invent light. Consciousness invents us. We don't invent consciousness. Everything we know, everything we have, everything we are is held in consciousness. That consciousness is the enduring light. That consciousness is the enduring presence. That consciousness is the enduring one, expressing in all the ways that we perceive reality unfolding. And we are given the challenge at Chanukkah and always to awaken to the absolute miracle, the absolute wonder that is the nature of our being. So I invite you to celebrate with me the miracle of Hanukkah this year. I don't know if many of you will be lighting a Chanukkah. You see one behind me on top of the bookshelf. I'm going to be lighting one with you in a moment. One of the ways that traditionally I honor each night, and in the work that I now do with my co-teacher, Tova Zev, we would be glad to share with you. If you go to rabbited.com and put yourself on the mailing list, we'd be glad to send you a Hanukkah mailing of focuses, intentions for each of the candles during the eight nights of Hanukkah. On the first night, we light one candle, the second night, two candles, until on the eighth night, there is a fullness of light and a fullness of intention and a fullness of consciousness and a fullness of just remembering the miracle of light. I would like to take the first candle, the first light. The Chanukkah is the candles are put in from right to left, and they are lit from left to right. So I'm going to hold this as you see it, so that this first candle can be lit for the illumination of this first night, and also to hold the energy of the illuminating presence, just to celebrate the one we are. One of the things that marks each of the Jewish festivals is a specific melody with which the blessings are chanted, and Hanukkah has its own melodic theme. It's one of the ways of, even though some of the Hebrew words are the same and some of the blessings are the same, the melody kind of brings with it the specific energies of the festival. We celebrate the ascendancy of the awareness and awakening of light beyond any celebration of military victory or of force or of effort. We celebrate in such deep ways the fullness of our own being, the fullness of the being expressing through each and every one of us. Because that awareness and that awakening can support the unfolding of a peace and a joy, a love and a life that can never be achieved through military victory, that can never be achieved through violence. We celebrate the light that we are, and we celebrate the light that reflects the way of deep connection. So I invite you to dedicate this light to the intention of the awakening to the greater awareness of the light you are, the light we are, right now. Holding that as the miracle, the essential miracle of life itself. The first blessing celebrates the kindling of Hanukkah light, the dedication that allows us to dedicate ourselves to being present in this light. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Chanukkah. Celebration, blessing for just being able to celebrate the Hanukkah light. The second blessing is a remembrance of the essential miracle and knowing light is the miracle. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam she'asa nisim lavotenu bayamim hahem bazman hazeh. And the third blessing The third blessing is just my favorite blessing. It's the blessing of this moment, the absolute specialness, uniqueness, fullness of this moment of illumination, this moment of light, this moment of connection. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. And to all of them, Amen. Amen means it is so. Amen is the it is so-ness that translates the energy of a blessing into the energy of the way we live, the way we walk, the way we open to the absolute wonder of our being. On this Chanukkah, I wish us all a greater awareness, a greater celebration of the light we are, of the light you are, of the light we share, of the absolute miracle of the life we share. It's a delight to share this light with each and every one of you. Happy Hanukkah. Bless you all.